Hi there, welcome along to another Jenny Kirk video, and today we're going to be looking at the liveries that the Mark 1 BG has appeared in model form in, and I've got most of them, but we're going to go through those and I'll talk a little bit more about each as we go. But let's get straight to it. Well, the first one that I want to show you here, this is the BG in the blood and custard or plum and spilt milk. It goes by a number of different names, crimson and cream, but essentially this is the livery that the Mark 1 BG first turned up in after British Rail decided they were going to have a clean sweep, clean broom. And as they did with the locomotives, with the BR standards, they also began a programme of radically overhauling the way that they designed coaches. At nationalisation, the railways had kind of continued business as usual and actually continued building some of the designs that dated back in some instances to pre-war days. But with the standard Mark 1s, it was all to change, and actually these coaches were so successful that some even continue in use today, and it's believed that there's probably around 101 of the BGs do survive in use and in preservation. It tends to be in preservation they get used for storage, although a number have been converted into other roles, such as disabled coaches, and also some have become kitchen cars too. But this initial livery, we have reviewed this coach, this model. It's a Hornby model, this particular one, the only Hornby BG that I've got. But we reviewed it a number of videos ago, and it is a really good representation of this particular livery. Back in the 1950s, the railways had a particular image which was kind of a continuation of what there had been in the pre-nationalisation period. They'd amalgamated it into the one unified image, and this was kind of the result. This continued for a number of years, but then there was inevitably an overhaul of the liveries, and I'm going to put that one to one side. So I'm going to bring into play the next livery, and what British Rail did was that they moved over to this all over maroon livery. It's actually pretty smart and very reminiscent to me to the LMS liveries that had gone before nationalisation. So in some respects, even though this coach is lettered up for being part of the Eastern region, so former London and North Eastern Railway territory, this is a livery very reminiscent of the London, Midland and Scottish, and I can't imagine that some of the railwaymen in the other regions were all that pleased to see what to them would have still felt like a competitor's livery taking pride of place on the coaching stock. That said, this livery actually does work pretty smartly in use, and I think that in part it was driven by the fact that the lighter liveries, as we can see here, were very prone to getting dirty. So very quickly the blood and custard livery probably started to look quite grubby, and in the post-war austerity years there was a manpower shortage, so it's probably as well to start using liveries that didn't require quite as much attention from the carriage cleaners. Very quickly though, I think the other regions kind of wanted to assert some kind of individuality, and as I've already alluded to, the London, Midland and Scottish livery was probably rankled, certainly in the Western region and the Southern region. So I've got here the all-over green livery, very reminiscent of the Monsell Green era that had been in the 1930s through the 40s to nationalisation. And that made a resurgence as the Southern region was able to repaint all of its coaching stock into this livery over a period of time. And the BG wasn't left out, it was painted into this livery. And I've got here the Bachmann model that they brought out. In fact, this is actually the very first release. And it said that the green that they used was a little bit on the light side. And I've seen so many different variations from both Hornby and from Bachmann in this green. It seems very hard to track it down what colour it really should be. But actually, in reality, I think there was some degree of variance as the paint pigments faded in the sunshine and also went through carriage cleaning with the chemicals that they used. It tended to fade stuff. So actually, quite a mix of different colours is probably a little bit more prototypical. The Western region, not to be outdone, went back to the chocolate and cream livery, which had been resplendent to the Great Western Railway. So we were kind of seeing the old corporate colours re-emerging. We've got the southern green, we've also got that LMS maroon, and now we've got the chocolate and cream of the Western region. It's interesting to note that at this point that the Eastern region didn't really come up with their own colours. I'm not really sure what they would have gone for. It'd probably be quite tricky, because a lot of the London and North Eastern Railway coaches were teak finish, varnished wood, whereas the Mark 1 BGs were an all-steel construction, so not really sure what kind of a livery they could have gone for if they'd have tried to have a degree of autonomy. This livery, I actually find, it's one of my favourites. It really does suit the Mark 1 coaches, and it alludes back in a way to the crimson and cream livery, which I think the sort of two-tone livery with the darker bottom and the lighter top works ever so well on the coaching stock, and clearly a number of people at British Rail tended to agree with me, because as we move further on in time we'll see that a theme starts to develop with this lighter top and the darker bottom, and the way that the lining is picked out is carried over into a multitude of different liveries. So we're going to move those out of the way, and the next livery that comes up, the BR Corporate Blue era. So we've got here the corporate blue and grey, but we can see that it follows quite closely the way that both the crimson and cream earlier BR livery and also the Western region chocolate and cream liveries are laid out. So it doesn't really look out of place, and when these were running mixed in rakes, I suppose, with some of the older liveries before they got repainted, it was something that actually they wouldn't look too far out of place. Now, a lot of people lament the coming of this livery. They see it as being the herald of the end of steam and this radical change in Britain's railways. But actually, for people like me, I do quite like the blue-grey livery. I find it quite smart, and it, for the first time really, it unified Britain's railways. It made them one corporate entity, and in some respects that was really the intention of this change in the liveries. We've got the all over blue of the diesel locomotives and the electric locomotives, and we had this blue-grey on the coaching stock. And for me, actually, I like that period before we get the rationalisation going into privatisation, before we had the explosion of the sectorisation liveries. I just found this really quite neat. Now I'm going to bring in this, and I haven't really counted weathered liveries that have come from the coaching manufacturers, but in this particular case this was a Model Zone Special Commission, and you can see it's in the blue-grey, but we have it branded with express parcels, and this is something that the BGs tended to be used for newspaper and parcels traffic. So it's expected that they were going to get branded to kind of differentiate them from the regular passenger carrying vehicles. So we've got here this example in the express parcels, and they're part of the Red Bank parcels set that Bachmann produced for Model Zone, and I was able to purchase this back in the heyday of the model shop chain, and sadly they're no longer with us, but we'll see as we go on there's a number of special commissions that they brought to the market in conjunction with Bachmann that allowed some of the more unusual liveries to see the light of day. Right, I'm going to put these two to one side And first off, I'm going to bring in some more of the corporate liveries, and I'm going to start with this all over blue newspapers liveried BG, and this is another vehicle that was in the parcels newspapers traffic, and rather than getting the blue grey livery which we can see here that we've got in the Model Zone Special Commission, a lot of these, I suppose, to try and keep them clean, because newspapers and parcels traffic didn't tend to get the kind of attention that the top link front line passenger carrying rolling stock got. So an all over dark colour, this kind of alludes back to the origin of the all over maroon livery, where we were having one eye drawn to how we were going to keep these clean. So this came out quite a successful livery from Bachmann, appeared in the main range, has had a number of releases, and it does go quite well with the multitude, the plethora of non-passenger carrying coaching stock that have been produced from both Bachmann and Hornby. Also from this sort of 1970s period, I'm going to bring out this. This is the all-over engineered olive green liveried version, and this was some of the BGs found a very useful role as spare parts carrying vehicles, running between some of the main depots and the more outlying depots, carrying spare parts to allow maintenance to be carried out away from the big centres of British rail engineering. So this particular one is stencilled up to work between Derby Loco British Rail Engineering Limited, BREL, and the Western Region Bristol HST depot. So this would have carried spare parts, things like probably brake blocks, that kind of thing, down there so that routine maintenance could be carried out. And for this role, the BG's got this, what I find is actually one of my favourite liveries, the all-over olive green, and I think it looks pretty smart in this livery. And they would have probably been marshalled into either a mix of regular revenue earning trains or dedicated engineering transfer workings with other wagons, especially if there was a lot of spare parts being sent out, where they would probably go out in one big long train, which would then be broken up, marshalled, sent out to all the different depots. And it is a nice livery, and Bachmann have actually re-released this, but with an all-over weathered livery, which actually, because these didn't tend to get kept all that clean, it was the case that they'd probably got filthy, so an all-over weathered version of this wouldn't actually look out of place. I'm going to move that to one side, sticking with some of the liveries of the 1970s. We've also got this in a re-railing livery. This again, another Model Zone Special Commission. It sold out very, very well. It's one of those that Model Zone commissioned that sold out in pre-order and now commands quite a high price. They did also produce a, I think it's a BCK or a BSK in the same livery, again sold well. And Invicta Models also brought out a CCT in a matching livery. Daypol have also done some of the former fish vans in a matching livery. But this is the BG, and it's stencilled up as to be part of the re-railing train, re-railing equipment, and this would have been based at Immingham. But the other coaches that have been produced, they have been stencilled up as being to be based at Cardiff Canton, and also I think Towton as well as one of the other ones that I've got. Bachmann have subsequently introduced I think it's a BCK to the main range in this livery, so you can get them for a more down-to-earth price if you really, really want them. But this BG may get reissued with a different running number at some point. It's certainly a very smart livery, and it's one that when the Bachmann breakdown crane is released, I'll be looking forward to being able to run some of these departmental liveried coaches with that. Going back to revenue earning traffic, the BGs also gained livery for one of the biggest users of these coaches in traffic on British Rail, and that's Royal Mail. Back in the days when mail did really extensively travel by rail, British Rail were fairly quick to livery up some of the BGs that were on the mail carrying contracts in this very smart Royal Mail inspired livery. So we have the Royal Mail red, and then we've got this very clever lining which incorporates not only the Royal Mail logo at one end, but we've also got the British Rail logo at the other. And this again is one that has appeared from Bachmann over the years. It's been reissued a number of times, and also a variant to look out for, which I don't have here, but was produced as a double pack with this livery and a plainer livery where we had just plain Royal Mail red, but without this sort of double banding down the side. I think that was done as a special commission 2-pack for Invicta models, but I would have to double check that. It is a pretty smart livery, and actually I run this with the Helgen Class 128 that's in a Royal Mail letters livery, and I think the pair do go together quite nicely and produce a short but authentic train that is quite pleasing to run on the Bolton Trinity Road layout. Moving on now, we've also got, I'm actually going to jump ahead a little bit, and this goes to the sectorisation period, and we've got the Rail Express systems, and this is kind of a development from the Royal Mail livery, and it's an interesting one because I always look at it and this blue pattern here looks like they've painted out some lettering. It's like almost like it's at some point had lettering on there and they've just rather messily painted it out with these blue bands. It does appear to actually be part of the logo, but it is interesting that it's not the prettiest of liveries in my mind, but certainly we've got the Royal Mail logo there, and you would probably have found that these coaches in this livery would have been intermingled with ones in this livery, and indeed probably also run with coaches still persisting in the all over blue livery. So you can produce for yourself quite an interesting and varied rake of coaches with a whole host of different liveries that with passenger carrying coaching stock you would probably have found that trains would have remained in one, maybe two liveries far more often. One livery that I'm going to mention now, and this is something that was produced as a limited edition for Model Zone by Bachmann, was Laboratory 23 in the RTC reversed blue-red livery. And it has to be said, I know you're already shouting at the screen saying that is not a BG, that is actually a Metro Camel Pullman, as the livery on Laboratory 14 is red. And I know that. This is because the Laboratory 23 is probably one of the most desirable BGs of any that have been produced as special commissions. It was sold out on pre-order. I did try and get one when they were new, when they came out, and I just couldn't do it because so many people had piled in front of me. And that was the thing with the Model Zone special commissions. They sold out so quick that you really had to get right in there on day one almost, or you missed out. I was lucky enough to get Wren, Laboratory 14, didn't get Laboratory 23, also didn't get the double coach pack, or Experiment, the Class 24. So there's quite a number that I missed out on. You know, it's one of those things, you have to move on. But the BG did run as Laboratory 23 in this livery. It's actually quite a nice livery, a very eye-catching livery. And if you can make up the full rake with one of the locomotives that have been produced, and I'll give you a tip, there is a Class 31 that's been announced as a special commission for Kernow Model Centre, and it is the Hornby Super Detailed one. So if you want to have an RTC livery train in your fleet, that's one to watch out for, upcoming probably sometime this year. Now, in the sectorisation period of BR, there's a number of interesting liveries started to turn up, and the BG was not left out when it came to carrying some of these liveries. So I've got three here that are quite eye-catching, were quite common around the system. And it's interesting to note that in model form, Bachmann did follow suit of sorts. Now I'm going to talk about the Network Southeast one first. This was produced as a special commission by the Signal Box, which was kind of the parent shop, as it were, for Model Zone. It's part of the Model Zone empire. It did trade under the Signal Box name, and for whatever reason, some of the special commissions were only sold through the Signal Box, and this was one of them. So it was produced along with a Network Southeast liveried Gov, general utility vehicle. I wasn't able to get the Gov, unfortunately, but I was able to get the Mark 1 BG in this sort of toothpastey Aquafresh livery, and I'm quite pleased that I did, because for an awfully long time this coach in this livery doesn't appear to have been reissued, and that's despite the fact that the Network Southeast liveried Mark 1s in general do seem to have been reasonably successful enough to have been reissued with an A suffix, and now that is something which has not happened for either of the intercity liveried ones or the regional railway liveried ones. But both of these got a main range release, and actually for a good number of years, in fact over a decade I believe, the regional railways and the intercity liveried Mark 1 BGs sat around, still available brand new from Bachmann, and were able to be picked up for around £10 right up until comparatively recently. And I think it's only a couple of catalogues ago that the intercity BG was still listed in the Bachmann main range as available from them, so it took a very long time to sell out. I actually snapped both of these up. I think I paid £10 for the regional railways BG. I got that when that was on sale, probably through somewhere like Hatton's when they were trying to sell the unsold stock. But the intercity BG, I paid what was then the going rate, the just below RRP. I think it was RRP less about 10%. So somewhere in the region of £15 or £16 for this. And yes, they really did sell for that when they were first introduced. So missed out a little bit. If I'd have waited, I could have got this for a bit cheaper, but it doesn't matter. I've managed to put together the intercity liveried rake. Took me about 15 years, but I tracked down one of every one of the coaches that Bachmann issued in this really eye-catching intercity sort of swallow livery, and still waiting for Bachmann to announce another run of these. I know that the regional railways liveried coaches, they have reissued them, but they've reissued them ready loaded with passengers, and I think weathered as well. And it's something about passenger carrying coaching stock that ready weathered doesn't really work in my eyes. These coaches tended to be kept reasonably clean when in passenger carrying use. Yes, I know that in the parcels traffic these things did get and stay quite filthy, but in passenger carrying service the weathered ones don't look right, and also mixing them with the clean ones, it looks doubly so not right. So I really do feel that coaching stock is something that probably the manufacturers would be best to leave the weathering to the end user if they wanted to have them weathered, because in my view they look a lot better clean. Well, that pretty much is it. Working through all of the ready-to-run liveries. There is a post-privatisation livery that I am aware of that came out as a special commission. It's something like 39175X, and this is running entirely from memory on the catalogue code, and that was in Network Rail Yellow. And it's one of the things that you have to draw the line somewhere when you're collecting. And for me, the line gets drawn with post-privatisation. I start to lose interest at the point that you get to looking at sectorisation liveries. Some of them, like the intercity, the regional railways, the Network Southeast even, I do like those, I do go for them, but others I'm not really too bothered, and Network Rail is outside of my collecting interests. So be aware that it is out there, and there are probably a few others. There may be Porterbrook Leasing. I think I've seen a model of that in the Porterbrook Leasing livery, but those are outside of my core interests. Be aware that they are out there if that is your thing. But that brings to an end a quick overview of the different liveries that are available in model form of the Mark 1 BG. It's a very long-lived coach. It's lasted from the inception of the Mark 1s right through to present day. A lot of people ask, why is there not a Mark 2 BG? And the answer is quite simple. The Mark 1 BGs were produced in such a number and were so successful that there just wasn't any need to produce a Mark 2 or a Mark 3 or anything else BG to fill the role that was already being carried out perfectly well by these venerable and well-designed coaching stock. Well, I hope you found that interesting, and don't forget to like this video, share it too, and also subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so, and ring that bell to be the first to know about new videos as and when we put them up. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying thanks for watching, and you take very good care of yourself. Bye for now. Today's video has been brought to you in part thanks to the generous donation of my fans on Patreon. And a special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Mark Anthony and Michael Churchwood. If you'd like to help support the show, head on over to patreon.com/Jennifer Kirk. Thank you. Today's video has been brought to you by my books, Bringing Home the Stars, Twinkle Little Star, and also you can get the complete comic collections of All Over the House, Books 1, Books 2, and also the wacky zany Life of Knobty Mouse. Thanks, and catch you later.